Thank you for your patience, Bitcoiners. Pardon the lateness. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Where do I sats? Good morning, Rickster Swixter. Good morning, McTimmy. Good morning, David. Pardon the lateness, team. Pardon the lateness. I couldn't abide by nothing working again. I just couldn't handle it. The stupid idiotic iCloud wouldn't update for no reason. It's just decided to take the week off work. It just doesn't do its job anymore. I kept sitting there. I reset it. It just updated yesterday. It kept saying updated yesterday, synced yesterday, or whatever the stupid thing is. I mean, give me a break. Everything's charged. What the fuck is going on? That's all I needed. So I had to redo the album and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, I don't want to bore you guys. You're not here to listen to the stupid technical background that it takes to come here every morning. And it should be simple, right? I try to set it up so it's simple and replicatable every day. I mean, we've talked about it a lot here. You go for the best quality you can get, but in a replicatable situation, right? You can't do something that's so complicated that you can't do it every day. So you got to tailor it so that it's possible to do every day. But then even the basic things don't work out. So, you know, just a nightmare. Just a stupid nightmare. Um, Thanks for the haircut comments, Bobby. Yes, indeed. I had family photo day. We've been doing it every year here in Barbados before we leave. It was nice. We have a great lady. She comes. We met her a couple years ago during the lockdowns. She does a great job. Family loves it. Same place, kids growing up, blah, blah, blah. Real fun. So, what you're here for confirmation of, I think, is that the sun came up, guys. It's up. We're great, right? Bitcoin's running. Let's have a coffee and talk about what's new. There we go. So, we're ready to start. I found some pretty good fake news. This stuff's awesome. And it's Elizabeth Warren again, spreading fake news. She's one of the great sources of fake Moscow time stuff. I mean, she's at the center of Moscow time, right? So here's what she says. Yesterday in America, if you guys didn't know, it was the day we pay taxes. It was the tax deadline day, right, for filing. And here's what she says. Have you been spending a lot of time and money filing your taxes? You're not alone. The process takes Americans an average of 13 hours and costs $200. And here's a big reason why. Corporate greed. It's corporate greed. So good. And Mike Solana adds, this is such a weird way of saying congressmen accept bribes to make our lives more difficult. So I normally don't put the punchline in. Moscow time should exist. Every one of the Moscow time submissions should exist without a punchline, right? That's the goal here, is to show how humor and reality are mixing in clown world to such an extent that you don't need a punchline. But Mike Solana was too kind to come up with such a perfect one here. So thank you, Mike Solana, for talking about what she really does. So now this one's great. This is not fake news. We're getting into the real news here, but some people think it's fake. There's reactions out on the internet saying, what a crazy person. And it's our friend Vivek Ramaswamy. So Vivek has come up with perhaps the greatest solution to the troubles that we're seeing in Taiwan. And if you haven't heard his solution, it's amazing. It's better than anything anyone's ever come up with. So here's the thing, right? If you don't know the background about what's going on in Taiwan, here's the story. China had a revolution for the communist government, which in the 1950s or 40s and 50s, which pushed out the elected leader of the old Chinese government, Chiang Kai-shek. And what happened was the government ran away and went to the island of Taiwan because they lost against the marching communist army, the Red Army of China. So they reestablished the government of China in Taiwan. And for many years, for like 2 decades, the United States government and other governments in the world recognized China as Taiwan and the government there. And then for many reasons, for practical reasons, all kinds of reasons, finally, President Nixon recognized mainland China and the communist government as China. it was kind of in a matter of time until then. So, in that sense, Taiwan has until then lived in this nebulous form. It's not a country, it is not recognized by anyone as a country. It's a de facto country, so it still gets these fake observer seats here and there on international organizations. It gets a fake Olympic team, right? It can't go under its own flag. It's something else with the Olympic symbols or something like that. So, for years, this other island has been in the middle of the conflict because America has promised to defend them, right? America already has military bases in nearby Okinawa and Japan from the occupation there after World War II. So for years, this whole situation has been about who recognizes Taiwan. Taiwan does a major lobbying effort around the world to get recognized. I've been invited when I worked in Parliament in Canada to many Taiwanese friendship parties, and they call them all these different names because they're not allowed real embassies and they're not allowed any of this kind of stuff. So what's going on now, and China has always promised that we'll take Taiwan over, and in a matter of days or weeks and months. Now we all have to accept that this is inevitable, right? I'm not arguing in any stretch that Taiwan will make it on its own forever. It could be something else, but much like Hong Kong, I predict eventually China will get it back. That doesn't mean the Chinese Communist Party gets it back, right? That's not exactly the same thing. That's not exactly what I'm saying. But somehow it will join the fold in whatever way makes sense. But what I predicted when China swallowed Hong Kong a few years, because now Hong Kong is no longer Hong Kong, right? Whatever it was before is now something totally different. I made a prediction that much like the end of The Matrix, right? Much like the end of the movie The Matrix. Remember the third movie in the series, how it ends? Not the first one, the third one, right? Where you end up with the hero Neo fighting every single living organism that has been subsumed by the agent. I forget his name, right? And what Neo ends up doing is he just allows himself to be absorbed, but within his own source code is the solution to destroy the agent, played by what's his name from anyway, the actor. So, um, so when he absorbs him, the code goes into the agent, and the agent is then destroyed. So the sacrifice of Neo is what allows for the agent and all of the people he's taken over to be destroyed. So I made a prediction when China first absorbed Hong Kong in this way that it would be similar. They would choke on the bone, right? They would get them, but what are you getting, right? You're getting a bunch of people who have been trained in some form of freedom or democracy and are not going to go along with what the government is doing. If you don't know the history of Hong Kong, by the way, it's very interesting. So when it was first won or taken by the British, what happened was the British went up the river to Beijing with boats. Beijing wouldn't even talk to them because they were barbarians, and then finally said, okay, we'll give you some land, we'll give you something to open ports. And they thought, the Chinese thought, the British were going to take an island near Shanghai because it was good for farming, had a lot of natural water and all those things. So when the British asked for this island in Hong Kong Bay, they were like, what are you taking that for? There's no water, you can't farm it. It's just a hill, right? It's just a hill. And they said, what a bunch of idiots, right? But what they didn't understand is that other than Manhattan, Newark Harbor, Newark Bay, other than that, it's the greatest natural port in the world. It's amazing. And if you're building huge ships, you can recognize that immediately. And as well, from a defense point of view, because it's on a hill, you can actually get to the top of the hill, the peak, and defend from downwards. So there's no natural water. You can't farm it. And that's what wasn't really understood by the folks who weren't building these huge ships and having naval warfare. So the story with Hong Kong ended up being that it became a place to flourish for all of these things because it was defensible. So what ended up happening was, and it was British soil, not the new territories that were taken later, Kowloon, that was on a lease. The actual island was just British and didn't have to be given back. That was a decision made by whomever in the 1980s and 90s. Kowloon and the new territories across on the mainland, the other part of Hong Kong, was part of a long-term lease and indeed was going back to China. But the island, no, it was just thrown into the deal for many practical reasons, right? So we don't have to go over why and whether or not it was a mistake or all those things. The important thing is that when the extradition law happened, so that the whole point, by the way, of what happened in Hong Kong with mainland China came down to one law: the ability to extradite people. And I don't know if you guys know this. That one law to extradite people to face criminal charges on mainland China was actually cited. The reason for which it was done was from FATF, the same enemies of Bitcoin, the same guys who do all the money laundering, anti-terrorism things around the world. That was the entire story about why they needed to be able to extradite people from Hong Kong to China, because they said it was a money laundering paradise. And if they didn't have this, then the whole world would fall apart. I mean, that was literally what they said. And Carrie Lam, the governor of Hong Kong, would say it all the time. And so, weirdly, the enemy of Bitcoin is the reason for which Hong Kong became a Chinese city again, right? And it is now part of China because basically the Chinese legal system applies. If you can extradite people from Hong Kong to mainland China, there's no such thing as Hong Kong anymore. It's just falls under the Chinese rules. And it did so because of the laws, the same bureaucratic regime that would ban protesting. We're going to bring it full circle because we're talking about that in America with Biden and his son by the end of this morning's gathering. So, if you remember, the whole point of protest and checking into people's finances began after the JFK assassination. I brought it up many times. The Bank Secrecy Act, looking into finances, looking into the flow of money, being able to follow the money from deputizing banks by law enforcement so that they would be complicit in law enforcement acts to find out who's doing what, had a lot to do with protests that erupted after JFK was killed about the Vietnam War and LBJ and all the murders of MLK Jr. and all these people. That all happened at the same time that America opened up its banks to be deputized by law enforcement and government agencies in order to follow the money, not to find out if there's crimes being committed, but to find out how protest is being mounted, according to some, right? According to some, which I believe. But I will tell you that there's another side of the story. Oh, it's just about deputizing so that the law enforcement can do their job. And da-da-da. Now, I disagree with that, but we're not going to litigate that today. So I made a prediction that, of course, just like in the Matrix, if China swallows Hong Kong, you don't know exactly what you're getting here. You're getting a different people because they've lived under this stuff for a long time. And the original protesters against the Manchurian China, Imperial China, the Empire of China, used Hong Kong as a safe ground to plot all of the revolutions that led to the Maoist revolution in the end. So the point of Hong Kong was that people and dissidents could come there and then be beyond the reach of China, which allowed for the empire to finally be destabilized after hundreds of years of rot and corruption and loss of vigor, loss of energy, the typical story you see at the end of an empire, very Joe Biden-esque, let's say, right? Joe Biden would have been right at home in late imperial China when the British arrived. So the story that I think is important with Taiwan is it's a very similar situation, right? I think eventually it all joins, and we've Narwhal Tacos here mentioning that Taiwan has never declared independence, indeed, because they say they own mainland China. They believe they're the rightful government of China. So they've never declared independence because you can't declare independence from yourself. They are China, according to them. And so the situation we find ourselves in now is, look, America is not going to be able to defend this place from a military point of view, right? That's just not going to happen. Like we can't get over there. We can do some shipping, we can do some Navy stuff, but I think that's about it, right? But here's Vivek's plan. And it's the best plan I've ever heard. And I never even thought of it. I never even came close to thinking of it. But here's his plan, and it solves everything, and it's even greater in this matrixy way, in the end of the Matrix Revolutions movie, where the agent absorbs, Hugo Weaving is the actor's name, where Hugo Weaving's character absorbs Neo. And here's what Vivek has in mind. To protect Taiwan, he wants to give every person in Taiwan an AR-15 and bring American Second Amendment rights to Taiwan. Now, the Taiwanese all have their, Elron. Yeah, Elron. Yeah, from, yes. And also in Um, he was also in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which was no, yeah, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which was remade in America as Tu Wong Fu. Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. Transvestite, really, really great movies from the 90s about transvestite lip syncing, and the whole culture around transvestite lip syncing, which were great movies, by the way. I was a huge fan, more so of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, but there you go. So Vivek's plan here is to give every single Taiwanese. Now, as I understand, most of the men do go through military training. It's not as militant as what goes on in Korea. I know that when I lived in Korea, all my male friends had to spend a year in military, or 2 years in military service, and they still knew, for example, if there was an attack on Seoul, every one of my friends who was my age and a male knew where to go to get their weapon, knew where the weapons caches were and the depots, and where they would get armed and where they would get ready for the fight. And so it's a lot more militant in and martial, let's say, in Korea. And of course, the Korean martial art of Taekwondo is heavily involved in their martial plan for their country, so that the folks are ready to go militaristically. Even to this, strangely, people don't realize this, but I've mentioned before I was a teacher in South Korea, and I remember one time when I had a student who was misbehaving, and I went to the gym teacher who told me, if ever a student is misbehaving, come and tell me, because this was in a normal middle school, not a private school. So in a normal middle school, first of all, the bad kids there's no janitors. It's just the kids, the students. They are all responsible with sweeping the place. When you come in as a teacher, they're at the gate and they bow to you when you come in. And then all the hallways are getting cleaned by the bad students. That's like detention. And so one day I had trouble with a student, and I told the gym teacher, and he's like, well, why didn't you beat him up? And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? And he's like, yeah, that's just, he's an idiot. Just pound him. And I was like, well, I'm not going to do that. Like, that's not the world I come from. So he ended up, and then he had another kid that was no good either. So here's what he did. And most of the schools are sort of shaped like an L in Korea. There's two big buildings, and in the middle would be a field, the soccer field or whatever. What he did was he took the two students, the student I had trouble with and another one that he had trouble with, put them in the middle of the schoolyard. So every kid, every class has a window on this L facing the field, and he just started the fight between them, and they had to fight each other. That's it. So I saw many fights started by teachers, and if a fight would break out on the schoolyard in Korea, the teacher would just make sure the rules are being followed. He wouldn't break it up or anything like that. These are all boys' schools, by the way. They separate the genders for their education system simply because they are militant and ready for war and want to teach all the kids how to be prepared. So the males, of course, have to bear the burden. The females are not asked in any event to be a part of this. There's no military service for females. Many teenage love affairs, for example, are ended in Korea because the guy's got to go off to a military thing and the girl just goes to school normally. So this is a big part of the culture. I don't think it's as militant and martial in Taiwan. I think everyone does have a little bit of service to do. They learn how to use a firearm, but they don't get to keep one. It's not like Switzerland, right? Anyone who tells you, oh, look what happens when everyone has a gun, don't forget Switzerland, everyone has a automatic firearm in their house. Everybody, right? Now, they've recently, in the past few years, taken away the automation of the gun so that it's no longer semi-automatic or anything, but they have machine guns in every single house and rapid fire guns and all that. And so the Swiss have military service and they keep the gun. So what Vivek is saying here is more like the Swiss plan, right? Give everyone in Taiwan a gun and make sure they know how to use it. And his last line here is, that'll give Xi Jinping a taste of American exceptionalism. Indeed, indeed. So you don't have to send anyone there. Actually, I never thought of this as a solution. You don't have to, as America, any longer send the entire army. You can send the idea of America to another place by simply allowing them to be armed and supplying them. He says here, the NRA, I think there are probably better groups that could go do it, but basically just send all those folks guns, and it'd be good for American gun makers, and it would be pretty good for them, and then we would see what happens, right? So anyway, there you go. So let's get to the big story today. Anyway, that's just what I think about how, and even contrast him, right? Contrast him for a second. Just look at Vivek's point on Taiwan. And yesterday, what's Trump doing? He's doing his NFT thing again, right? Which is funny. We like it, right? But there's a lot more going on in the world than that. He did it once and proved it worked. Now, again, I got it wrong last time. I laughed at Trump when he released the NFTs. Only a day later did I realize it was a brilliant move. But I think timing was a little off on Series 2 of his NFT launch. But that's just me doing comparisons to the people running. So the other big story is the Fox News Dominion lawsuit. So if you guys don't know what that is, Fox News was getting sued by the Canadian makers of the voting machines for defamation, and it was like $1 billion or something, whatever. So they settled out of court, and lots of people sort of dunking on Fox News today and saying, well, the whole thing about it was the following, that Fox News knowingly lied. Apparently, Fox News understood the election wasn't stolen in 2020. And because they knew for a fact it wasn't stolen, all reporting after is a lie, because they were, according to the mainstream media, if you listen to their points on this, they knew that the election was on the up and up and totally clean and nothing wrong with it. And because they knew that and still reported on these things, they were actually just trying to give the audience what they want. Right? It was like they were giving the audience what they want. That's the whole gist of it. But here's the interesting thing. DC Drano writes, here's the reason Fox lost the lawsuit against Dominion. They didn't believe the 2020 election was stolen and communicated that to each other. Ironically, if they had believed 2020 was rigged, they wouldn't have lost the $787 million. Indeed. Now, what I want to get into for a second is a little bit, I think what's relevant for Bitcoiners here is this believing the money, believing it was stolen or not believing it was stolen, right? And the reason I think it's important is because it actually has more to do with embarrassment and not being humble and having ego and looking over your shoulder to see what that person's thinking and what that person's thinking. And in the end, all they had to do was report on Trump and what he was saying. Because Trump, I think, really believes, 100% believes that it was stolen. And so because he's not lying, he could be wrong, right? He could be wrong, but he still believes it. So their mistake, indeed, according to DC Drano, was by even giving any credence or by ignoring what Trump was saying because everyone was laughing at him and deriding him in those days after, that would have been the problem, right? So here's what Hans Monkey says. This should have been a no-brainer from the get-go. The president of the United States made a bunch of claims. That fact alone made the claims automatically newsworthy, irrespective of whether they were true or not, and irrespective of whether other news outlets reported on them. So, indeed, by not listening to Trump and not accepting or believing him, not even listening to him, not believing that he believed it, was enough to get them into trouble here. And what's interesting about it is, we talk a lot about being Bitcoiners and staying humble and all those things. Well, part of staying humble, the magic trick of staying humble, right? Because it sounds easy. It sounds easy. Stay humble. That could mean to some just keep your head down, right? But that's not exactly what you get to do as a Bitcoiner. You don't just get to keep your head down, right? People come at you. You have a point, right? You have a principle. So the staying humble thing can be tough sometimes because I'm right and you're wrong and this and that. And then people, who hasn't been mocked and laughed at for Bitcoin? I remember being at a cafe in 2015 going on about Bitcoin all the time as I did. And someone saying, oh, that's still around, right? And, obviously to embarrass you. And I don't know how many times that's come up. Oh, the Bitcoin thing, right? How many people have said, oh, how are you going to solve it, right? Bitcoin, right? How many times have you had to deal with that? Now, it's easy when the markets are good and it's pumping and da-da-da-da, right? But staying humble means all the time. So the magic trick, and if you can learn this superpower, you are indeed superpowered. which is don't get embarrassed. It's not easy, right? But that's what staying humble also means, by not feeling embarrassment for things. And Trump is one of the greatest people in the world for that, right? He just doesn't feel embarrassment if he believes in something. If he believes in it and it's stupid, he's going to say it anyway, right? He's not filtering it through what people are going to say about him, or if they're going to laugh at him. He gets laughed at and mocked all the time. You got to respect that about Trump, whether you like him or not or whatever. You got to respect that he's a person. People call him thin-skinned all the time. He's the exact opposite. He probably is the thickest skinned person I've ever seen in my life. Now, it doesn't. Again, I'm making fun of his NFTs today. I'm in the Vivek Ramaswamy camp, in the sense that this is the best solution I've ever seen on Taiwan in my life. I like all these new ideas. I like all of this kind of stuff. But Trump's ability to indeed not be embarrassed by things that he's done or said is a kind of superpower. And for Bitcoiners, what's important is when we are thinking about staying humble, that's what ego is what would prevent you from worrying about being embarrassed or having embarrassment affect your actions, your thoughts, and all of that kind of stuff. So remember, the staying humble part, very difficult, but a trick, a superpower to stay humble is to not get embarrassed by things, right? Just not feel embarrassment by things. Now, I mean, there's instances, of course, where, if you do something that is truly reprehensible, I can understand why you would feel embarrassed. But having an opinion, having a thought, and especially about Bitcoin, the economy, saying no to the experts, not having the answers, for example, about what's going to happen next. Well, I don't really know, but I know this thing is no good, and I have faith in this thing. Even saying those things out loud can get, people can say it's embarrassing. So that's what I like to say is that having this off switch for embarrassment is a superpower and can help you stay humble. And so what it looks like happened is journalists, right, were afraid and worried. If you remember the cognitive closure that was going on in the days after the election, anyone who started saying it was a scam was socially ostracized, was called conspiracy theorist, was called all these kinds of names. And remember, right, the cognitive closure goes full circle, because when people say, oh, January 6th was an insurrection, remember what they're there protesting. They're there protesting an insurrection, what they believe to be an insurrection, right? They believe it. They believe it 100%. They're there to protect America from an insurrection, and were then accused of being insurrectionists themselves. So it's a big distinction, right? And an important one. But the claims here, I think, will end up coming full circle, because this whole embarrassment and pridefulness on the part of the media is institutionalized across. It's not a partisan thing. The folks who work at Fox are as weak in their own personal awareness, because they're still worried about being embarrassed by their colleagues and their industry and all of these things, instead of just saying the truth, that the whole thing, right? The whole idea of being able to, the whole idea of worrying about what your colleagues think at different media companies, and being in this media bubble itself, the professional journalists that work for corporate media all kind of look at each other as a group, as a social class, as a profession, and worry and wonder what each of them think about each other. And that could actually now open up the floodgates to exactly what we saw with Trump, with Dominion and Fox. So here's one way to look at it, right? That and Hans Monkey says it again. I don't know how to pronounce his name. It's Mahncke. I just say Monkey. From a Schadenfreude perspective, Fox thoroughly deserves a simulation and financial devastation, even just for fraudulently calling Arizona. But from a legal and rule of law perspective, this is a total disaster. Fox merely did what CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, WAPO, etc. do every single day. And in the end, it might turn around, right? So the idea here is that you could start seeing that CNN, MSNBC may actually start getting sued regularly in different states. Just like, You see Alvin Bragg in a blue state of New York taking legal action against Trump. I think you might start to see statewide lawfare go on across the United States about stuff like this. And imagine if you started to look at suing MSNBC and CNN for defaming Trump supporters. I mean, there's probably no end to this, right? Probably no end to this. So there you go. And there's going to be more reasons to do so, way more reasons, because we saw the leaker story just last week or whatever. I said immediately, when the leaker story, this fella Teixeira, who they've arrested for putting files on the Discord servers, and you had the media hunt him down and find him and all of these things. I made a prediction at the very start of that. First of all, I said something's a bit fishy here. It looks like there might be a mole inside, and there might be something going on that we can't see. Now I start to think, indeed, that it is a persuasion tactic, right, to get ideas out there. But I still believe internally within American intelligence agencies, there's a kind of civil war going on. And not one that you can see, but there are people who want to change things and people who are partisan and want to maintain things and all that. And it turns out that Freddie Sayers from Unheard, who I think has become one of the better interviewers in the world. If you don't know this guy, he's been really successful since the lockdowns and has some really great content. And what he says here is that he was talking with Martin Gurry, an ex-CIA analyst, and they were talking about the Pentagon leaks. And what he says is it's only the beginning. And they go through a little bit about what he sees coming and the kind of battlefront around leakers and what's going on and how much stuff we're going to end up finding out from people like him. Indeed, with what's going on with the hunt that the media did on Mr. Teixeira for the Pentagon leaks, really now shows how difficult it is to be a leaker. But in a way, the moment something like that happens, it often spurs an Newtonian third principle here, where you get equal and opposite reactions, right? The more the media hunts down leakers, the more you're going to get. A little bit like the strange and macabre logic behind the school shootings, right? That's why I continue to say, don't talk about them. I don't talk about them ever on this stuff, the mass shootings and all that, right? Never the smartest thing Jon Stewart ever said, the liberal host of The Daily Show from the 2000s, just stop saying their names. Don't call them by their name. Don't even say their names. We shouldn't know that much about these people ever, right? Because, of course, you fetishize what they did and all that stuff. But anyway, forget about that negative story. Move back to the leaker thing. Now that this leaker has happened and there was a hunt, certainly it would cause fear in some. And Michael Schellenberger talks about it a bit here. He says, whistleblowers used to be able to leak information vital to the public interest, like the Pentagon Papers, to mainstream news journalists. That's no longer the case. Today, mainstream journalists help the government hunt down whistleblowers. And he's referring to a Matt Taibbi article that he published in Racket News. The press is now also the police. And they go into it. The media was actually hunting this kid. This is the same Freddie Sayers interview that Michael Schellenberger is now citing. The media was actually hunting this kid. When has that happened? It's a measure of how far the media and elites are shoulder to shoulder saying we have to control the information environment. The knitting together of agents of the government and establishment media, we saw it in the Twitter files in the UK with COVID. It's a reactionary move to turn back the clocks. Elites in the 20th century had it good. There's been a blow up by the digital tsunami. And he goes on, unlike many, they talk about, another one of these weird simulation links, the Pentagon paper, the original major leak, which they made a movie with Tom Hanks. I like Tom Hanks, and the worst actress known to man, Meryl Streep, like just the one of the lowest IQ, low talent, same person in every movie, actresses. And they were in this movie together. And so what it refers to is the Pentagon Papers, 1971. Here's the simulation link, right? What do we know as 1971? We were talking about 64 and the beginning of Bank Secrecy Act and spying on the money. Well, the what happened in 1971 handle on Twitter is one of the greatest ever, just seeing how much the world changed from when the money changed, when the spirit of the money changed. Um, so the Pentagon Papers were officially titled the Report of the Office of the Secretary for the Vietnam Task Force. And it showed, and it was Daniel Ellsberg, and Glenn Greenwald's been bringing it up for a while now. And it was underlining the Johnson administration systematically lying to the public, to Congress, and manipulating events for this war. And the whole movie's about whether they publish, whether they state secrets, and the big reveal is what'll happen if we don't publish, right? And they were such heroes, and they were so great. Thank you, Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks. So again, it's from 1971, and from then, as the money changed, our entire relationship with the media, with government, and with government secrets and whistleblowers seems to have changed. And what Michael Schellenberger says here is we are not in 1971 anymore. Here is a list of corporations and journalists who appear to reject the Pentagon Papers principle, and that's what they were talking about, and may help the government track down whistleblowers and leakers. They should be mistrusted, not trusted. It's hard to overstate the size of the betrayal. Pentagon Papers test the media's independence. In 1971, they passed. In 2023, they failed. Now, you get even more. So the reason why it's so devastating is because we don't really know what to trust at all anymore, right? Here's another thing that's been coming out, leaking over the past few days from the Mises Caucus, right? Talking about court filings from the Guantanamo Bay Military Commission, which reveals possible CIA involvement in the 9/11 attacks, right? Now, imagine 9/11. That's been one of the big conspiracies for years, right? That people laugh at, right? Oh yeah, inside job. It was an inside job. Inside job is a punchline. You can use that as a punchline because the mainstream media has been so good in blunting all questions about what happened in those days. So here's what they say. The Mises Caucus has a Twitter thread on that underlines this whole Guantanamo Military Commission reveal. Documents show a relationship between terrorists and the Saudi intelligence service, which is really the main reveal here, formed by the U.S. CIA officers through a group called the Safari Club. And here's the big story. It's a secret alliance of nations the CIA uses to conduct unlawful operations in America, right? Because the CIA is not allowed to operate in America. They got other folks to do it. Now, I'm not going to go through the details of all this stuff. What it looks like is that they knew the attackers who got the visas on the planes. Everyone knew that they were flagged by Al Qaeda. Everyone knew that this was happening. Everyone knew these folks were bad news. So here we go. People are starting to talk about it right now. I don't know exactly what they're going to find, but it's the start of some of the huge narratives that have been put in place since the death of Kennedy and LBJ and everything that America has recognized in itself in this era is starting to come to light as maybe being not true, not even close, right? Not even close. America's own perception of itself changing. And again, it's the reason why I am so, as a Bitcoiner, right? I've mentioned my politics many times. As a Bitcoiner already who gave up on politics as a solution to our problems, who understood that Bitcoin was the only way from the moment I left politics to be a professional in this industry, in Bitcoin, which has been, I started on Bitcoin every day 10 years ago. I quit my job in 2015 to just focus on Bitcoin, and everything else that was going on to make this happen. And so at that time, I already knew politics were not the way, but those are the reasons why I was such a big Trump supporter in 2015 and believed he was going to win the presidency, no problem. Why I was such a huge Trump supporter through 2016, 2017. I loved him, thought he was great, right? Now, as a Trump supporter, but as a Bitcoiner first, I was quick to say the following. I prefer Biden in the second term. Trump did enough in the first term to change reality and our perceptions. But I'm not because I think Biden's got good policies. You can't squeeze Trump much more to get more out of him. He's already destabilized the whole machine. The very first day of Trump's presidency was all we needed. I said that the minute he was elected. We don't need anything else. Just the act of him getting elected, just the days after he was elected, the mental crises that followed in the months after were enough. We didn't need anything more. So as a Bitcoiner, I've often said I was a huge Trump supporter, but I like the new guy even more. I like the brain with the dementia and as a symbol of the dollar, as a symbol of American erosion. No one believes him to be the leader of the free world. The idea of saying leader of the free world and the picture of Joe Biden in your head is comical. It's hilarious. It's the stupidest thing you could ever think of, right? Again, why I am a John Fetterman 2024 supporter, 100%. I wish Fetterman would run for president in 2024. It'd be great. It would be great because we're changing the role of the presidency. We're changing the perception of it. We're changing, through changing the perception of the president, changing the perception that we have of America and how much our ego can be informed by this idea of America that is fabricated now. Fabricated, right? Now, I definitely believe in U.S. exceptionalism in the way that Vivek is describing it, right? Like Second Amendment, First Amendment, if they're exercised, and no one can deny the fertile ground for human innovation that has happened in America. No one can deny that, right? And you don't have to be born there. Anyone who comes to America, look at Elon Musk, right? He's born in South Africa. I think he's Canadian as well. And look what he's done in his time in America, right? And he's said it many times. He's the biggest fan of America for those reasons, right? You have to go to America because this stuff was possible, right? Definitely possible. But now things have changed, right? Things have changed. And War Clandestine has a great, because while all this is going on, right? While all of this is going on, while people are talking about what's going on with Fox News and lying in the media, we have the big case of COVID and the viruses and the vaccines and all the other stuff that went on. So what we're getting here is some pretty interesting stuff. So Kaneko the Great starts off by saying, former DNI John Ratcliffe says the CDC director, the Secretary of State, and the Director of National Intelligence agreed that COVID-19 was most likely created in the Wuhan lab. So John Ratcliffe was, of course, with the Trump administration, right? But Dr. Anthony Fauci labeled the lab origin as a conspiracy theory because he funded the lab. You had the top diplomat, the top of the intelligence community, the top health public official, all telling you with some confidence level that the most likely origin of this was a lab leak. Some of those individuals, including Dr. Fauci, were promoting the idea that this was natural origins, and notwithstanding the language which was read, they were referring to this publicly as a conspiracy theory in certain conversations and interviews. The best evidence of that is their own conversations, which say that they didn't want unwanted attention to the relationships that were taking place between Western virologists and those working with the Wuhan Institute of Virology and funding sources for some of that research. War Clandestine breaks the whole Ratcliffe interview down by saying, the testimony from Ratcliffe talking about the overwhelming body of evidence supporting the lab leak origins is going viral. Obviously, I agree with him, but the widely shared video cuts off before Ratcliffe starts blaming the CCP. Here's the full statement. So, what if the Chinese military were responding to a biological attack? So War Clandestine starts wondering. Ratcliffe asserts that they destroyed tests, samples, and data. If we found a rogue lab creating bioweapons in the US, wouldn't you expect our military to destroy the pathogens and confiscate/destroy the data? Ratcliffe also asserts that China had the audacity to produce propaganda that the US created COVID-19. I wonder what gave them that idea. Maybe it was the fact that the US have the largest global biolab network and have been doing gain-of-function research for decades. It was the US media and their controlled media who published and distributed more propaganda about COVID and the rest of the world combined. The US Gov and MSM just started admitting it came from the lab a couple months ago. Now, all the reason that China are not happy with the Select Committee on COVID is because the US have now declared China to be responsible when Russia and China have been saying it came from a lab this entire time and that it was created by actors within the US. The US Gov and MSM are 3 years late to the party on the lab origins. In fact, the US Gov censored anyone who suggested it came from a lab. And now the US thinks the rest of the world should listen to them after being wrong about everything. It's beyond preposterous. So what you have now is a situation where the US economy is in big trouble, right? We've got bank runs. We've got Apple, who might have started a bank run yesterday, right? Apple, who announced they have this new bank with a high yield, has drained something like 60 billion, according to some, 60 billion out of the banks. Let me just make sure that's true, right? Let me just make sure that is true, because I found the numbers to be super high. Where did I put it? Anyway, the number is pretty high, right? I don't know where it is. Anyway, um, so even Elon yesterday saying in his Tucker Carlson interview, right, saying that the government can always just print more money, and you're going to have inflation no matter what if they print money, right? And that's what happens. You don't need to go further into it. And he predicts a financial crisis on the show this year because of that it won't stop. Real estate could get involved in it, and could be trouble. But here's what I wanted to get back to. So you got the economy, and you've got Biden sort of, right? Now you've got all these investigations on Hunter and what's going on. And Jonathan Turley puts it this way. He says, the investigation into the Bidens has made many in the Beltway uncomfortable. Remember we were talking about when we were discussing embarrassment, right? And ego and all of those things. Here's how it's coming full circle. Influence peddling has long been the favored form of corruption in the city, but few families have cashed in to the extent of the Bidens. And Joel Pollack from Breitbart also says, I frankly do not understand the willingness of so many Democrats to cover for the Bidens. Democrats have gone all in with censorship, but this is an effort to scuttle investigations into corruption that may have resulted in millions of dollars going to Biden family members. Now, you've got pessimism at its all-time worst in the American economy. You've got a group of people that are still coordinating to protect Joe Biden. But at a certain point, the embarrassment thing is going to come through, right? And who's going to want to be associated with these people? Who's going to want to be tied to a pathogen and disinformation campaigns that were released on it? So I've said for a long time, right? For a long time, and comparing again back to China, right? The thing that is the advantage the average Chinese person has in bringing in a Bitcoin standard to the world is they've got an obstacle in their CCP, but the one thing they have is an understanding that patriotism is not linked to their money, right? It's not their money. They have other reasons to be patriotic and to love their country. Now, if you start to think about what America losing a war looks like, I don't want American people dying, right? That's not what I want. But America losing a war because no one trusts the intelligence community in America anymore because of COVID. No one trusts America or changes their calibration of trust in America because of what happened with our elections and our president and all that stuff. And then we have this pessimism around our economy, and we're no longer the economic leaders of the world because the money itself fails. Well, that's, as Trump said, right? If America loses global reserve currency status, that's like losing a world war. Right? And I've said for a long time, for Americans to ascend to the Bitcoin standard and to change what's going on with their economy, there's a certain amount of humility and humbleness that has to come, right? Having patriotism for our institutions blindly on both sides, Republican and Democrat, and tying in money and military as the defining factors of our patriotism is how we went wrong. And we don't have a free press. We don't have fair elections. We're barely functioning. What's left of the republic? What's left of it? The Supreme Court, maybe, and people are trying to destroy that. It's not the executive branch. Legislative branch is crazy as ever, which is fine. The states are showing the federal side of republicanism is healthy and stable, and that might all be all we need. It might be enough, right, to get through this. But the economy is full of pessimism, and America's got a lot of troubles. And if you add them all up, it can turn into a complete change in what Americans think about when they think about patriotism and the reasons to be proud and why they're such advocates of American exceptionalism. I think they're going to maintain their advocacy and belief in American exceptionalism, but it's going to be for better reasons than it is now. And if that track happens, if that is what plays out here, if indeed we start getting amazing revelations on the Bidens and all the Hunter Biden stuff, and the media finally starts talking about it a little more, or even this defamation suit that you saw with Fox, right? The implications of that could spread wide and everywhere, and so you might end up getting conversations that will, I think, speed along the ego death of Americans and open up the opportunity for amazing changes right before our eyes. And that's where the whole staying humble is so important, right? And not being embarrassed, because the shamelessness of some of these people defending these guys is one thing, right? But they have to change the story. They've got to manipulate it. We don't have to be that coordinated. We just have to continue to stick on the very simple things we believe in, and it should be enough. All right, let's see what the comments say, and then tomorrow is my last day here, by the way, in the south. I'll be heading north. So things are a little crazy. All right, let's see what we got. Do all lawyers talk with their hands? Yeah, maybe. Maybe. We like it. Morning, Mark. Trump NFTs. Yeah, they were pretty funny. I need a receipt the next time I vote. Yeah. Gun violence might be less if we let our kids fight supervised in the schoolyards instead of spending hours on video games and bullying it. Yeah. I mean, look, it's not. It was weird for me to see at first the situation in South Korea with the kids fighting, but they have a different level of respect and ease with each other because of that. Now, a homogenous society helps, right? They all call each other brother, sister, cousin, all that. So indeed, hard to stay humble. It sounds easy. Stay humble and stack sats, right? Black box voting is a joke. The software is just glorified. Yeah. No, that's just the thing, narwhal tacos. I mean, we've been saying that for a while. That's why the case never had any. The whole Dominion thing was stupid from the beginning. Who's auditing the software? Who's auditing the hardware? Who's auditing any of that stuff? No one is. No one. Nobody. Like trying to swing easy in golf. Yeah. Yes, trying. Yeah, exactly. That's what's so hard about the egoless things. Trying to swing easy in golf. It's exactly that. Looks easy. It's not. I was stupid all while using my early bitcoins like an idiot until I suddenly realized that savings should not be spent on anything. Yeah, we all did that, boo boo. Don't worry. I spent a whole bitcoin once making a machine water plants in someone's backyard. You could like remotely order it to water plants, and it was like 0.05 Bitcoin at the time. This would have been 2015, so 0.05, $200 a coin, so it was like $10 or something to make this stupid robot. But it was awesome. It made the internet look like a vending machine, so it was hilarious. I mean, we couldn't get enough of it. We were like jumping over each other to make it work. Ding, a whole Bitcoin. Dumb. What are you gonna do? Yeah, yeah, no kidding. Yeah, you got another Rickster's fixture. You're on. Missed this one. My son had a teacher who organized lunchtime fighting with rules for anyone who wanted. Yeah, very good. Totally productive. Yeah. They did that kind of stuff when I was a kid too. I used to confuse staying humble with being meek. Yeah, a lot of people, Rickster. You're on a roll today, man. These are great comments. A humble Bitcoiner is a person who's tried orange pilling his friends, then learns to. Yeah, I don't think I've ever in my life told anyone to buy Bitcoin ever. Like, I mean, unless it was just like very passive. But people always come up to me in the big runs. Should I buy now? And I'm like, you got to learn about it. Like, this is not. I think I gave. I remember giving. I was. This is a fun story, actually. You can go check the headlines. Right when that stupid movie, The Paper, came out, with the one I was referring to with Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks, I was actually asked to keynote a crypto show for Yahoo Finance in the New York Times building, where the movie it was like out in theaters when I did it, I think, or was in the air or something like that. So this would have been like early 2018. And so we took over the actual old, where the movie was filmed, the old New York Times building in Manhattan to host the show. And you can still see my headline there. So it was the like January 2018 or something. So it's the top of the markets just coming off. And everyone wants to talk about, Ethereum and all this. So I think the headline in the newspaper that covered it was Bitcoin is the alpha and the omega, says CoinDesk researcher. Da, 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 da. So that was like, I put an end to all the other stuff. I said Bitcoin is the alpha and the omega. It's the whole story here. Forget about everything else. I said the CryptoKitties thing about congestion in the network was very interesting because you had this use case and demand. And I said, fantasy sports and all of that stuff is going to be huge. And I still believe that to this day. Ordinals are just another iteration on that. So I focused on Bitcoin for the talk, but at the end, and I think it's in the article covering the interview that I did, which is because they what's advice for people. I said, don't come at this lightly, right? Don't come at this lightly. You're dealing with very, very, very important. I don't. That's such a stupid way of speaking English. Very, very important. You're dealing with intensely critical, psychological, intimate details of your own understanding of the world. Don't just YOLO in and think things are going to be fine, right? You're getting involved in ego death here. You're getting involved in extremely intimate parts of your own mind if you go down this road. And so Google it, go look at the headline, read the article. I think it was in Fortune magazine or something like that. I did a lot of press back then, like mainstream press. So the title is literally Bitcoin is the alpha and the omega. So you shouldn't have too much trouble finding it. But indeed, that was the point, right? Is that what I was trying to do here was not like, hey, buy Bitcoin. I was saying to them, hey, careful. Whatever, if you start, you might not be able to stop. Don't come at it lightly. Come at it with a serious mind because this is serious business. So there you go. My son's school is a Waldorf free school. Yeah, cool. Cool, boo. Hot take on me. I'm not going to lie. Well, I mean, you know why? I shouldn't even. The reason I said it is because I have a family member, a lot of academics, and all regularly with the underhanded insults. And I remember I was a big Jim Carrey fan when I was a teenager. And when the movie Man on the Moon came out about Andy Kaufman, and he had all this buzz around winning awards, and then the Truman Show, and he started making these big movies. This academic took it really personally because I had predicted he would be a great actor. And she was always insulting me because I didn't like Meryl Streep or something, like always backhanded insults. And she loved Meryl Streep. So I have a bit of a personal thing on that one, just because it's been a lifetime of suspecting she sucked. So I have narrative bias on it. I think she sucks. So, but it goes back to teenage family kind of stuff in my case. Boo Boo growing up in the 60s and 70s, we had outlets and most were outside the home, ball fields, real music, jobs. Today the outlets are media and from media. Yeah. Like and share, indeed. Like and share, folks. We love the sharing and the liking. All right, we're going to be wrapping up soon. Grew up same time, totally agree. More self-organizing behavior opportunities. Yeah, I'm one of those people that's at the border of millennial and Gen X. So I socially grew up with the Gen X being just older than me, and I was filtered through the education system before just even my cousins and people who were a little younger, 2, 3, 4 years younger, had the participation medals. I had none of that we didn't get that. But I did have an Apple computer the moment I was in kindergarten, not at home, but at school. The Mac came out, just before I started school. So that's one of the, I had the internet in high school, Facebook in college. I had sort of the millennial media around me, but I still had a lot of personal ties because the kids just older than me were all Gen Xers. And so socially, we were still caught up in that world. So it's a very unique bridge. And we were able to see I remember being very close to violence, put it that way, as a kid. Kids still are. I shouldn't say that's not the case. I've seen this pictures in schools. Yeah, relearning with Bitcoin. Yes, U.S. citizens relearning with Bitcoin. That's it right there. Right. There's new things to learn about for Americans. New ways to identify themselves and think about themselves. The world is beginning to wake up to what money is indeed. System of control. Right. Absolutely. For decades, is Lyme disease one of those? Lyme function research for decades, is Lyme disease one of those? I don't know. From Apple Card is new high yield savings now available. Yeah, exactly. 4%. 60 billion has apparently jumped into it. Pull nearly. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Apple raises price 60 billion in a day. Headline from Financial Times. It's amazing. Yeah. Incredible, huh? And they got the white paper built in all devices, so hopefully they're on the good side. We'll see. Thanks, Boo Boo. Rickroll. Without it, you're just, yeah, they're just lettuce hands. Yeah. Yeah. Tried to orange pill my older brother, offered to give him some and teach. No, don't. No, 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 no. No, don't get involved in that. I gave my brother a bunch too. He just lost it. Don't go down that road. And he still will ask me, and I'm like, no, man, I'll give you fake political money if you need it, but I can't give you real money. You don't respect it enough to have responsibility. He didn't lose it. It wasn't like a whole coin or anything like that, but he lost enough for me to not just give him, oh, I want to learn about Bitcoin. No, I'm not here for that. I could pay bills. That's another story, but I'm not just giving someone Bitcoin if they're not. Nope. Get it yourself. And I've given away a lot in my life. But you got to be careful. It seems like it's a race. It seems like this is a race for our dollars. Yeah. Yeah, they got magic on their side. Boy, I'll buy anything Apple puts out, even if it's all crap. I don't know what it is. Those stupid headphones, the big ones, the minute I saw them, I wanted them. I will never buy them. I don't have any need for that. But it just showed their voodoo black magic that they have at Apple. I don't understand it. It gets me every time. I covet Apple things, So dumb. It doesn't work. Why? P-Man heading back tomorrow, my man. So tomorrow we'll have a show. Friday might be a little tight because I'm taking a train. I arrive in Montreal and I got to take a train because I'm actually on my way to Texas. I'm just dropping my family off in Toronto. So there's a couple trains coming up in the next few days. But we'll see. I'll keep you guys all up to date about what's going on. Good observation. I am Gen X. Yeah. But you can tell the Gen Xers. You can tell. I only give small amounts. So yeah, that's what I turned myself into. Just small amounts to teach. And in the case of my brother, it was a long time ago, and people didn't know. He was careless, so I forgive him, right? But I don't just go around giving it out. And I'll only give people, anyone who asks, instantly give them everything I got as far as information, right? But that's not like buy at this price and what I don't know anything about that. None of it. Don't know. It's the Hollywood with Apple. Do you mean like the we've talked about a lot about a Hollywood being a wand and a magic wand? Yeah, I mean they got some kind of magic. I'm telling you, they do. Even just the metals they make their machines out of, I love. All right, team. Peace. Thanks for coming. Thanks for the patience today. Sorry about being late. It was I just couldn't abide by this stupid thing not working. Apple garbage again. It still hasn't given me what I want. It's still sitting there. There should be an album shared between devices. It's still not there. I had to remake it today. That's what it was. I make it on my phone through the day. It should appear on my iPad. if it's all charged and syncing and all that. And today it just wouldn't. So I just had to make a new one right before. That's what took me time. I had to like put the things in order in an album and find them again and the whole thing. Anyway, stupid and boring. You don't need to know how the sausage gets made, guys. But there you go. Try Google Photos. Maybe, but really, it's supposed to be just a device handoff thing. Like it's convenient for me to prepare my notes on my phone, not so much on my iPad. I might just have to start preparing the notes on my iPad. I guess. Dumb, but that's life. All right, team. Peace.